Good evening from our studio here in Sarakunda. This is Star TV News with me, Mumudu Bailabare. Coming up tonight, GPA to construct new sites to ease its operations. JA Oil Company makes clarification on its petrol quality. Trust Bank presents 2.5 million to NCC ahead of AFCON 2024. On the international news, Netanyahu cancels war cabinet meeting on Gaza. Heartbreaking testimonies from Gaza's survivors. This and many more in just a moment. To the news in details now. The Gambia Ports Authority Managing Director earlier today expressed plans to commence construction of a new port site. The GPA boss made this revelation during a press briefing held at his office in Banjul. Hadijaju attended the presser and she files in this report.
The Gambia Ports Authority has been facing numerous challenges in terms of capacity constraints, which have led to the loss of business in 2023. To address this, the Managing Director of the Gambia Ports Authority, Usman Jobate, stated that new sites were identified for the alternative location of the ports of Banjul for more sustainable operation. As part of the transformative drive, the Gambia Ports Authority have signed a new performance contract with the government that governs the relationship between both parties and has established some target both financially and in terms of qualitative. The contract cites the increasing use of IT systems in the business processes at the ports to reduce human interference.
Major event that has happened this year in terms of the governance environment is that the GPA was able to institute some new IT systems in our business processes, all with a view to re-engineer the systems in place and reduce human interference as much as possible to bring about more efficiency, accountability, and transparency in the processes. This we are doing using in-house resources in anticipation of the implementation of a wider digitalization project for the ports.
The Gambia Ports Authority has invited public-private partnerships to invest in the infrastructure needs at the new Dipsy in Sanyang, which aims to enhance the country's potential in serving the local and regional market.
We are investigated between I think Bigelow up to as far as Katong. 7 locations were identified and the inspection team narrowed down on Sanyang as an alternative site for a deep sea port. But the main challenge there is the master plan had also mentioned that the basic infrastructure that is required to have the shelter around the coastline is what is called a breakwater, like going to have a seawall. And the estimate for that was $500 million. So according to their recommendation, the business case was not strong enough to invest $500 million to create a breakwater when the traffic did not justify that need. So that's why the investment was decided to be done in Banjul. Now,
among the transformative drives is the increased use of IT systems in cargo handling and revenue collection. The Gambia Ports Authority has implemented an e-tally for recording of cargo discharged and loaded at the Banjul ports. For Star TV News, I am Hadijaju.
One of the country's leading petrol companies, JA Oil, on Friday makes clarification on rumors making rounds that the company used to mix its gas oil with other substances which cause damage to vehicles. The JA Oil manager seized the opportunity to shed light on the company's ambitions for 2024 while speaking to our reporter Modu El Baji at their main office in Brikama in this report.
Nearly every household in the Gambia, there are one or more vehicles which makes fuel consumption high in the country, and big companies also depend on fuel to run their generators to back their daily operations, most of whom get their fuel supply from JA Oil, which has made the company outstanding in providing fuel to Gambian and non-Gambians in the country. However, many users of the JA Oil gas oil have started accusing the company of allegedly adding some substances to boost their production, which in turn affects vehicle. The company manager, Momodu Haidara, denied the allegation.
You come with your own fuel, also you deposit it in that storage tank. And in the morning, when we are going to fetch our supply, you fetch from there, I fetch from there, everybody fetch from there, and we take it to our different entities for sale. Now, what is more baffling is, how could you tell me that very morning, we all took from that same jar, but the water you are testing in your mouth is better than the water I'm testing? How ironic that could be. So this is the problem. But you know, there's a root cause to everything. Like we said in the beginning, you don't know everything and say everything. We know all these things are fabricated lies meant to dampen our progress, which in the contrary, has pushed us up because God is not sleeping. So this is what happened. So whatever we do, we put God in front. If whatever we want to do and there is nothing there in the next world for us, we don't see it as something very good. Why are we venturing into agriculture? Because farming is something good. We could say, let's keep doing what we're doing. We bring things, we trade and make our millions out of it, put it in the banks.
When asked about the Jar Oil Company's 2024 plans, Mr. Hydra revealed that their company intends to invest in farming, adding that efforts are already in place as the company has already secured a piece of land in CRR. Mr. Hydra added that they want to start rice production and other consumables that matches the country's soil fertility.
Production will not be limited on rice. Like he said, we are also looking at vegetables like onions, potatoes, and even sunflower for vegetable oil production, because we realize that sunflower, the seeds, succeeds very well in our soil. So this is the plan for that. This is the only way we think is the future for this country. And in so doing, we are calling on government also to put their hands on deck. And also communities can also benefit from it, both employment-wise and food security-wise. So this is our plan today. And as we are speaking, work is on progress. Trying to clear and trying to secure the area and trying to bring the engineers to do the necessary engineering work in the field so that we can have a successful irrigation system that we can produce all the staples in this country.
The Jar Oil manager also dilated on a loan scheme from an international bank which aims at supporting Gambian business tycoons who can fulfill the requirements of the loan with support from the government of the Gambia. Hydra added that there are strings attached to the said loan.
You have to get the fee for 770, and then you have to put a collateral of $3 billion, which is equivalent to 50 million US dollars. Most people ran away, if not all of them. They all ran away because people even confronted me in the street once and twice and said, well, what they are asking is too much. That is impossible. Nobody can afford that. And I just kept my quietness because I know if you cannot afford something doesn't mean I cannot afford it. So when the matter stands there, now the loan is ready. The only person who came forward and said, well, if nobody is ready to take it, we are ready to take it. That is when we came in front. They said, okay, pay the fees. We put it on the table and paid the fees.
The Jar Oil Company not only creates job opportunities for Gambians, but also opens philanthropic arms to needy communities and individuals. For Star TV, I am Mojo Elbaji.
Trust Bank Gambia Limited on Friday donated $2.5 million to the National Coordinating Committee NCC for the Scorpions of the Gambia as part of preparations for the AFCON 2024. Awasane has more in this report.
Trust Bank Gambia joined the crusade in support of the Scorpions ahead of their encounter in Group C amidst high expectations as fans anticipate for history to be written again by our players come January in Ivory Coast. Jilan Senghor, Managing Director of Trust Bank, added weight on the topic.
For Gambia, what is remaining is for us as a nation to rally behind them and give them the kind of support that will validate what they are doing. We need to support them financially, we need to support them emotionally, and we need to be there in our numbers. So before I proceed, let me add that in addition to this donation, we are sending 2 of our staff to Ivory Coast. We are also providing GRTS with support so that for the rest of us who cannot grace the occasion, we can sit in the comfort of our homes and enjoy it on national television. Trust Bank is a very proudly Gambian bank, and that is why anything that affects Gambia is our business.
Musambai, Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Youth and Sports, commended the efforts of Trust Bank in supporting sports in the Gambia. He also grabs the opportunity to call on other banks to keep the ball rolling to promote Gambian sport.
We'll definitely minimize the risk on government. The last time we had this bilateral with the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Finance, we tried to see how much government contribute and how much the NCC can raise. So we're trying to see how we can ensure the risk on government is minimized. So this is one step in that direction. So we want to thank you once again so much for this. And we used the opportunity to call
Mr. Papsen, co-founder of the Point newspaper, was in attendance, and he also called on the need for more support, ranging from those in the business sector and other private agencies to join hands.
Financially and morally to boost the morale of our players is a big challenge. But thanks to Trust Bank to open the door to make sure that others will follow the same suit to help. Because without
the Gambia has been drawn in Group C alongside Senegal, Cameroon and Guinea for the group stage of the 2023 African Cup of Nations. Awasane for Star TV News.
Congratulations to Trust Bank Gambia Limited, and that story by Awasane will take us to the break. When we come back, we look at news outside the Gambia. Stay tuned. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, this is Star TV News from our studio here in Serekunda, and we are broadcasting from our studio here in Churchillstown. And now we take a look at news outside the Gambia. Israel's war cabinet was due to meet to discuss a deal with Hamas, negotiated by the Americans, the Qataris and the Egyptians, about exchanging captives for Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails. That seems relatively uncontroversial. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told family members of the captives in a meeting on Thursday afternoon that negotiations are still ongoing. The second thing that was going to be discussed at the war cabinet was what Gaza would look like the day after the war. But Bezalel, former Netanyahu's coalition party, decided that he didn't want that discussion to take place. He's very much against the Palestinian Authority, PA, having any role in Gaza post the war. He's also very much against transferring any money to the PA, as the Americans have been urging. So under that pressure, Netanyahu decided the war cabinet would not have any discussions about this. Instead, he would have it to the wider security cabinet meeting, which is going to take place on Tuesday. Netanyahu cancelled the war cabinet, worried it would fracture his coalition, fracture his government, and put his position as PM at risk. More in this report.
Of despair, these families have been displaced multiple times, and now that they may well be forced to move again. Hind al-Khudri, Al Jazeera.
2 people have been wounded in a stabbing attack at an Israeli checkpoint near occupied East Jerusalem. The alleged assailant was shot dead by Israeli forces at the scene. Well, the Israeli military then raided the alleged attacker's home in the neighborhood of Jabal al-Mukaber in occupied East Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cancelled a war cabinet meeting meant to discuss the post-war plan for Gaza. He's been facing growing criticism from members of his own cabinet over talks for the day after in Gaza. Far-right members of the ruling coalition have announced they'll be holding their own meeting in protest over their planned exclusion from the discussions. Well, Alan Fisher joins us live now from occupied East Jerusalem. Alan, so this Israeli war cabinet meeting was cancelled at very short notice. What is this telling us, Alan?
Okay, let's remind ourselves, there's the war cabinet, 3-man war cabinet, there's the wider security cabinet, and then there is the full political cabinet. The war cabinet was due to meet. What were they meant to talk about? Well, the deal that is being discussed with Hamas, the Israelis, being negotiated by the Egyptians, the Qataris and the Americans about the exchange of captives in Gaza for prisoners being held in Israeli jails that are Palestinian. Now, that seems relatively uncontroversial, and Benjamin Netanyahu told the families of those being held captive in a meeting on Thursday afternoon that negotiations are still ongoing. The second thing that was going to be discussed at the war cabinet was what Gaza looks like the day after the war. But that's why Benjamin Netanyahu cancelled it, because one of his political cabinet, one of his allies in the coalition government, Bezalel Smotrich, decided that he didn't want that discussion to take place. He is very much against the Palestinian Authority having any role in Gaza after the war. He's very much against transferring any money to the Palestinian Authority, as the Americans have been urging. And so under that pressure, Benjamin Netanyahu decided that the war cabinet would not have any discussions about this. Instead, he would leave it to the wider security cabinet, which is going to take place, we're told, on Tuesday. But it shows the internal pressure that Benjamin Netanyahu is under. He knows that there has to be a plan drawn up for Gaza the day after. He's under pressure from internal security service, from the the Israeli army and also from the Americans to have a plan in place, but he cancelled it because he was worried that it could fracture his coalition, could fracture his government, and would mean that his position as Prime Minister would be at risk.
And Alan, away from those political divisions, what more details are now emerging about that stabbing incident in occupied East Jerusalem?
This happened last night. A young 23-year-old Palestinian man allegedly stabbed 2 Israeli police officers / army at a checkpoint at Jebel Mukaber, which is on the edge of occupied East Jerusalem. One of those who was stabbed is in a serious condition in hospital. The other one was wounded. The 23-year-old man was shot dead at the scene. The Israeli army then went to the house and arrested the mother, the father, and the sister of the young man. Now, they'll be held for questioning, essentially asking them, did you know about this? What did you know about this? And if you did know about it, why didn't you tell us? More often than not, they're completely in the dark as well. The house was ransacked. But this is a controversial policy because essentially this is seen as collective punishment for the family because of what someone did. There is also the possibility that the house might be demolished. That will be a decision taken by the courts. But again, this is the idea of collective punishment, which has been criticised by many human rights organisations, that if someone in your family does something wrong, then the whole family suffers as well. It's still got to go through the courts, as I say. But the Israelis take this collective punishment idea because they believe it acts as a deterrent to stop these sort of attacks. But the reality and the evidence proves that it really doesn't.
All right, Alan Fisher live for us there in occupied East Jerusalem. Alan, thank you. Meanwhile, the Israeli military has continued carrying out overnight raids across the...
Finally now, Israel's war on Gaza has had a devastating impact on children. Nearly 9,000 have been killed and thousands more injured. Here's the story of 6-year-old Mohammed, whose relatives and neighbors have stepped in to take care of him after an Israeli strike killed all his siblings.
Israel's war on Gaza has had a devastating impact on children. Nearly 9,000 have been killed and thousands more injured. Here's the story of 6-year-old Mohammed, whose relatives and neighbours have stepped up to take care of him after an Israeli strike killed all his siblings.
محمد صابر قديح عمرك 6 كنا قاعدين اختي لارين ولمار وانا ونجاح وشام غرفة الجلوس مع بعض
فقد عيلة ابني 4 أنفار هم امهم وابني متغرب وقعد 15 سنة لما جاب الولد هذا، والولد هذا كان معهم، كان مع العيلة، ولكن ربنا خلاه عشان أبوه بده يعمر البيت استكر، ماتوا كلهيتهم يا أخوي، كلهم ماتوا، فيش غير الطفل هذا.
كنا بنلعب، ضرب علينا صاروخ، طاحت علينا الدار، وكان معي كشافة بالنص، طويته وطلعنا واحنا وبنت خالي.
بحكي لي في كشاف ضوالي وانا مشيت وطلعت هيك لقيت جبل اللي هو 4 طوابق، جبل كبير، نزلت من على الجبل ونزلت من عليه، الا بقول شوي بعدين بحكي اخذوني في الاسعاف واخذوني على المستشفى.
كان مع امه دائما مسكته دائما وشاطر وفهمان، والحين بجري هيك مش عارف كيف، عشان بقول بدي اروح لامي بتدور علي، بصيح بقول امي بتستنى فيا. طب امبارح بقول امي بتستنى فيا، عندها بتدور علي، مش دار عن حاله.
امبارح يعني اشترينا له علبه لبن، بحكي له خذ اشرب، بحكي لي لا ماما عندها في البيت، موجود في البيت عند ماما. الولد يعني صغير، ايش ذنب الاطفال؟
مش مفرط فيه لا انا ولا عمامه كمان بربوا فيه، مش مفرطين فيه، هو نتفة الوحيد اللي ضل ابني، يعني انت عارف.
هو رايح على الغربة لبناء مستقبل أبنائه، هو أصلا متشوق لهم، والله العظيم متشوق لرؤيتهم، والله بتصل على أمي دائما بحكي لها أنا بدي أروح، بتقول لا هو هدف، بحكي أنا هدفي بدي أشتري قطعة أرض وأرفع رصيد للانا وأخواتها للجامعات وأنا بروح. فجأة يرنوا علي يقولوا أولادك كلهم ضاعوا، استشهدوا في هذه حرب الجبانة. حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل. نفسيتنا يعني نفسية الناجي الوحيد محمد في هذه الحرب. الذنب الأطفال تضيع في حرب ما لها داعي، في حرب. إحنا شو ذنبنا؟ إحنا شو ذنبنا؟ إحنا في المدنيين بطبوا في الناس، في الأطفال.
That's the final story. Before we go, a quick recap of our main headlines. GPA to construct new sites to ease its operations. Ja Oil Company makes clarification on its petrol quality. Trust Bank presents 2.5 million to NCC ahead of AFCON 2024. On the international news, Netanyahu cancels war cabinet meeting on Gaza. Heartbreaking testimonies from Gaza's survivors. Well, that's all for this edition of today's news. Thank you very much for watching. Do stay tuned and enjoy the rest of our programs. Until then, have a very good night and a prosperous new year in advance.